Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries. Type Ivan Vassili into any video platform, and you will find dozens of narrators insisting the story you're about to hear is 100% historical fact. The tale describes an iron-hulled Russian freighter built in 1897 that became possessed by a malevolent entity. Over the next decade, this unseen force drove its crew to horrific violence and mass suicide before the vessel was finally dragged to port and burned in 1907. In maritime lore, this is the quintessential hoodoo ship, a vessel cursed with relentless, supernatural bad luck. It is frequently cited alongside other famous enigmas like the SS Orang Medan. There is a sharp divide between the digital lore and the physical archives. While internet sleuths present the ship's terrifying voyage as an undisputed event, actual maritime registries present a total archival void. This timeline reveals a massive temporal fracture. While the digital lore is set during the Russo-Japanese War, official naval registries associated with this name are anchored nearly a century earlier, leaving the 1903 freighter as an archival ghost. To understand how this happened, we are going to reconstruct the exact anatomy of this myth, plotting its fictional voyage port by port, before using maritime archives to dismantle it. We must examine the historiographical process that allowed an undocumented myth to bypass fact-checking and install itself as a legitimate historical reality. According to the lore, the Ivan Vassili was constructed in 1897 as a sturdy, slow-moving vessel with an iron hull and wooden decks, intended for routine cargo runs across the Baltic Sea. In 1903, as the Russian government prepared for war with Japan, the freighter was allegedly repurposed to haul coal to naval warships halfway across the world. To complete that immense journey, the ship supposedly docked in Zanzibar to take on fuel. It was here, while loading coal, that the crew reported the feeling of a heavy, malevolent presence boarding the vessel. This photographic record shows the harbor of Zanzibar during that era. Amidst these stone fortifications and traditional dhows, the sailors' psychological distress supposedly began. As the ship pushed into the Indian Ocean, the unease escalated into acute paranoia. Men on night watch claimed to see a glowing, humanoid mist drifting across the deck and disappearing behind the lifeboats. Days later, the tension snapped. A terrifying scream triggered a violent melee, with the crew attacking one another in the dark. The hysteria ended only when a sailor named Alec Levinsky threw himself overboard. When the ship finally limped into this coastal town on the Russian Pacific coast, the breaking point had been reached. 12 traumatized men immediately deserted the vessel, refusing to spend another night on board. The remaining crew members attempted to flee, but the myth specifies they were rounded up by local authorities and forced back onto the cursed freighter under armed surveillance. This first leg of the voyage establishes the engine driving the legend. The terror functions as an inescapable, localized force traveling with the iron hull itself. The curse followed them to Hong Kong. On the approach to the harbor, another screaming frenzy gripped the deckhands, culminating in the death of Captain Sven Andrest, who reportedly jumped from the bridge and drowned. The terrified crew deserted again. A skeleton crew remained, and the Russian government reportedly promoted the second officer, Chris Hansen, to captain before ordering the vessel south toward Australia. The pattern repeated. Just before the freighter docked in Sydney, Captain Hansen took out his revolver and shot himself. By the time the ship was tied to the pier, every surviving sailor had abandoned their posts. The boatswain, Harry Nelson, eventually hired a hardened, skeptical crew who dismissed the ghost stories, and they set a course for the American West Coast. A week from the coast of California, the violence peaked. 2 men entered an uncontrollable rage and murdered a crewmate. That same night, the skeptical new captain shot himself. Defeated, boatswain Nelson managed to steer the vessel back to Russia. In 1907, a mob of sailors reportedly set the Ivan Vassili on fire, burning it to the waterline. The legend's use of specific names, ranks, and global ports creates a powerful illusion of a verifiable historical timeline. We must now pivot to historical source criticism. When we cross-reference international maritime registries from 1897 to 1907, the record is silent. no iron-hulled freighter by this name was ever built, registered, or scuttled. The Ivan Vassili freighter is an archival ghost, but the name itself is not a fabrication. This name belongs to Ivan Filipovich Vassiliev, born in 1776. He was a real navigator for the Imperial Russian Navy who lived nearly a century before the events of the myth. In 1806, Vassiliev accompanied the Neva expedition, meticulously surveying the Alexander Archipelago and mapping the rugged coast of Alaska. His life ended in a genuine maritime tragedy. Vassiliev drowned in Okhotsk Harbor upon his return to Russia, an accident that resulted in the loss of his invaluable hydrographic papers and drawings. The true legacy of Vassiliev remains on the map of the Alaskan coast. Geographic features like Vassiliev Bank and Vassiliev Rock still bear his name today. The ghost ship myth is a clear case of folklore conflation. It appears to be a merger of Vassiliev's name with an undocumented 1907 rumor about a cursed steamer named the Perrier. Misappropriating a real naval officer's name provided the anchor point required to pass casual fact-checking and allow the story to survive into the digital age. We can deconstruct the supernatural symptoms of the myth by looking at the grounded maritime realities of the early 1900s. Poorly ventilated coal bunkers frequently leaked noxious fumes into the crew quarters. Prolonged exposure to carbon monoxide causes intense paranoia, confusion, and visual hallucinations. Combine these toxic environments with severe overwork, isolation, and outbreaks of tropical disease, and you find the biological drivers of what witnesses called collective hysteria. These natural tragedies were later harvested by pop history authors like Richard Weiner, who stripped away the environmental context to package the sailors' suffering as paranormal events. Faced with an archival void, many modern digital creators rebrand the absence of evidence as the definitive proof of an unsolved mystery. This creates an information cascade. When a story is repeated often enough across enough platforms, the sheer volume of replication establishes it as an accepted truth. The Ivan Vassili saga serves as a warning about the fragility of history. An algorithm-fueled ghost story has almost entirely eclipsed the genuine legacy of a naval pioneer.